Scots have migrated all over the world, but today I'm going to talk about the most incredible of all migration journeys. So if you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you the story. When the Battle of Waterloo was being fought on the European mainland, there was another battle going on in Wester Ross. No, not that one. This one. Actually, technically it was Sutherland. No! In a small town of Ullapool that clings to our Atlantic coastline, a school teacher and preacher called Norman MacLeod was involved in yet another feud with the establishment. He'd grown up in the rugged, even harsh environment of Assynt, working the land and fishing the sea. But this voracious reader and solemn Presbyterian saw his future fishing for men. It's a long walk from Assynt to Aberdeen University, gold medals and theological studies. It's quite another journey from here to Edinburgh, where the wheels came off the lorry as he parked it to prepare for Church of Scotland ministry. The great schism that created the Free Church of Scotland wouldn't be for another 20 years. But the struggle between old licht, sober, formal, hardline piety, and new licht, light touch, fanning about Presbyterianism, had been going on for quite some time. Norman MacLeod was old lichty. And the Church of Scotland's laxity was why he'd given up on its ministry. And what caused the stooshy with the local parish minister in Ullapool. The minister, who could control the attendance of Norman's students at school when Norman refused attendance at Sunday services. Locked out of his school, he went back to the fishing, choosing the most dangerous but the best paid fishing jobs up in Wick to pay down debts and fund an Atlantic trip to start a new life and career in Nova Scotia at the age of 36, when his first career had hardly started. En route, Norman's role as visionary leader was called on. In a violent mid-Atlantic gale, the ship sprang a leak. Every hand was bailing out the boat as water spilled in and threatened to overwhelm them. The captain announced that he was turning back from Ireland. That's when Norman's diverse roles as seaman and religious visionary were coinciding. The seamen calculated that their longitude was nearer to Nova Scotia than Ireland, but the preacher told passengers and crew that they should continue westwards because God had shown him a vision of a disaster if they should turn back. Trusting the holy man's insight, Nova Scotia was sighted not long after. Norman had created a congregation. I'll be preaching the gospel of Scotland back home this autumn with live shows all over the country. Click the link in the description for tickets to my live stand-up comedy show Stories of Scotland in Aberdeen, Dumfries, Gala, Perth, Portree, Motherwell, Dunoon, Greenock, Giffnock and Dunfermline. Links for Edinburgh tickets and elsewhere are still to come. Many of our transatlantic cousins tell of families cast out across the oceans in clearance events, but some were pulled rather than pushed. And Norman MacLeod's letters back to Assynt meant that when a ship came to enlist passengers for the Americas next year, there were 150 ready to sail to the protection waiting under the wings of Norman MacLeod. Neighbours, boyhood friends, acolytes and pastoral lambs flocked by boat across the Atlantic. Now Pictou was already established, so the Sutherland emigres couldn't gather in a consolidated settlement like they'd enjoyed at home. They were scattered to the wind where land was still available and friends could be found. What they really wanted was to be in a community near Norman and his church, but they were in the world. A world full of tree felling and rum, and fur traders and rum, and sailors and rum. It was a rum business. If Norman had left Scotland because the Church of Scotland wasn't austere enough for him, Pictou was wall-to-wall sin and debauchery. But God makes his own plans. And in his second year at Pictou, a settlement of Highlanders in the United States invited Norman to come down there to minister to them in Ohio. Do they have rum in Ohio? One way or another, Norman decided to go. But what about his existing flock? They could come with him, away from the worldly sinfulness of Pictou. So they set about building a boat that the sinful folks in Pictou called the Ark. A boat big enough to take a group of men to settle in Ohio and send back for the women and children later. As they sailed round the eastern edge of Nova Scotia on the way to the US of A, they turned to the south and stopped off in St Anne's Bay. This was perfect. It was a sheltered bay. It was almost entirely untouched. It had access to fishing, it had land to spare. Coastal land that could be cleared for farming and a hinterland for logging and hunting. If God really meant them to go to Ohio, he wouldn't have led them here and given them the stuff to make lemonade. They spent the winter preparing shelter in a fleet of smaller boats to transport their families come springtime. So in the spring of 1820, they picked their families from Pictou, not realising that the alliteration would get worse when they themselves were picked up by a pitiless northeasterly storm that threw the little boats across the Gulf of St Lawrence onto the mercy of Nova Scotian coastlines and the inhabitants of the few settlements around. Norman himself was taken in by one Father McEachern, a missionary priest from North Uist. God's deliverance sent by a Catholic. What a topsy-turvy world it is. One by one, the scattered, battered groups limped slowly until finally, on May the 20th, 1820, in brilliant sunshine, they all reached their new home in St Anne's Bay. They built a community. Norman, unordained in Scotland, got accreditation for the ministry in what had recently become the United States of America. He was authorised as magistrate and obtained a licence to set up a school in what would become Canada. Friends and family who'd stayed in Pictou headed for this new haven to settle. Now, it's a measure of the impact of this little group of Gaels that today St Anne's is the location of Nova Scotia's Gaelic College. Teeming fish, black earth and flowering maples, but steep land and the long isolation of lingering winters. Paradise isn't home forever. It's some place you spend a short spell until competition arrives. It might be Church of Scotland ministers, farmers, storekeepers, boat builders, or missionary schoolmasters. There were internal fallouts. Young folks courting before it was an appropriate time, unintended slights and the encroachment of that hardy wild critter, the prickly ego. A species which seemed to survive the chill of Canadian winter every bit as well as it clung to Scotland's wave-lashed Atlantic outcrops. Norman MacLeod could be harshly critical of those in the community that didn't live up to the standards he set for God's elect. Not just in private, but from the pulpit. But the same castigation of moral delinquency wasn't in view when it came to his own sons. When his second son, Donald, was given responsibility for a ship and the job of taking the ship and its cargo to Glasgow to sell them both, he was never heard of again. The late 1840s brought potato famine in Ireland, but Nova Scotia wasn't exempt. 1848 was the worst year for a community with growing mouths to feed and limited land available. And now, destitution and hunger knocked on the door. How would folks make it through harsh winter? Would they be welcomed and land in Canada? Or maybe even America? Then a letter arrived in St Anne's. The letter was from Norman's son, the prodigal who'd absconded with a boat 8 years earlier. He was now a newspaper editor in Australia. What the bloody hell's Australia? It's a place with a great climate, no long winters, and land. Australia was a huge and empty land. What do you mean, Indigenous people? As the letter passed round the hungry, famine-ravaged community, they came to one obvious conclusion. We're going to need a bigger boat. Now, I say that flippantly. The truth is, this wasn't an easy decision. Some had been born in Nova Scotia. Some had already crossed one ocean to build a utopia. How many oceans can one person cross? And how many utopias can you build in a lifetime? Husbands and wives took different sides. For a people whose culture had been clan, kin and land, how can you leave all three as your parents languish in the graveyard so recently dug? But the letter was so inviting. Now this wasn't an overnight book a flight and go. They had to build a ship. They had to finance the journey. They had to collect together a community. There were delays due to ill health and Canadian winters. But finally the day came and pipers led a procession to the boat. But even at embarkation there was a scramble when Mr. and Mrs. Fraser's daughter wasn't aboard. Panicked inquiries uncovered that she had been last seen on a horse and trap heading for the local magistrate with her sweetheart Hugh Mackenzie, who'd refused to leave Nova Scotia. A commandeered pony, a race to the magistrates and a door burst open on a completed wedding ceremony later, the parents headed back for the ship in Australia without their daughter, the new Mrs. Mackenzie. You can imagine the journey. 6 months with 140 souls on board a cramped, community-built ship. School lessons and sermons, rations and tedium, confinement in open sea. Until April 1852, they arrived at the mouth of the Torrens River in South Australia, only to discover that Norman's son Donald was nowhere to be found. What? Again? It turns out that gold had been discovered in Melbourne, and every man and his dog had hightailed it along the south coast to prospect, pan, mine and dig for disappointment. They'd sold their ship, but there was no block of land where the community could put down roots together. Instead of a New Jerusalem, it was more years eking out an existence in the wilderness, dispersed far and wide between South Australia and Victoria. Of course, the folks back in Nova Scotia had no idea the disappointment as they prepared the second ship. Highland Lass, she was called. Her journey was more eventful still. Frost caused a delayed start. Once underway, chicken pox ran through the ship. They discovered spoiled food and with nothing to replace it for 3 months, had to toss much of it overboard. But there was joy on the journey with the birth of a child. Sadness with the death of a woman. Worse still, another young man was lost overboard. Finally, on October the 6th, 1852, they arrived in Adelaide to the news that it wasn't the utopia that they'd hoped for, but a clan scattered hither and thither where land and job opportunities allowed. The scarcity and quality of water meant that typhoid had claimed many, including Norman MacLeod's 3 youngest sons. But 5 years earlier, another group of Presbyterians from lowland Scotland had crossed these same oceans, not stopping at Australia, but going on to set up the new town of Dunedin in New Zealand. Norman contacted the governor of New Zealand, saying that he needed a block of land where his community could come and live together. They bought a new ship, the Gazelle, and they sailed the Tasman Sea on the 2nd of September 1853. The September 21st edition of the New Zealander said, "The schooner Gazelle has brought a number of immigrants who we trust will prove a valuable addition to the population, arriving, as they have, at a time when practical agriculturalists are so much needed all over the district. They are originally from the north of Scotland, had emigrated first to America, from thence to South Australia, where they remain but a year, and have been attracted to this country by its superior agricultural advantages, for which it is becoming so deservedly famed." That wasn't the end of the story. A second ship followed from Australia as the flock were gathered in. And then, over the next 7 years, 4 more ships would leave Nova Scotia to bring Highland Scots here to Waipu on New Zealand's North Island, including Mr. and Mrs. Hugh Mackenzie, who had eloped from the quayside rather than leave Nova Scotia. In March 1866, Norman MacLeod, the man who'd never quite settled, lay dying. Many of the folks who came in those later boats weren't following him, but they wouldn't have sailed here but for him. Some followed a man, some followed a lifestyle, some followed their community, but all of them followed a dream that had spanned 4 countries and 3 continents. This must have been the longest ever Scottish migration, unless you tell me differently. Why not tell your story briefly in the comments below? It's funny, every one of us owes a debt to our ancestors who dreamed, worked and sacrificed for their children without ever knowing if we'd even exist. There's another migration story coming up on screen now. Support the channel and get extra content by clicking top right and becoming a Patreon member, or buy me a coffee in the description below. In the meantime, in the land of the Gael, Hammy and Doch is going to be a lamb at life. Sherry and Rasta.